Welcome to Human Glory. What if the most secure system in the galaxy failed not because it was broken, but because it was never designed to understand its target? Tonight's story begins inside a tribunal that has never made a mistake until one human walks in and reality itself starts slipping.
The tribunal chamber had executed entire species leadership without a single procedural error in 2 centuries. Nothing slipped through its systems. Nothing went unrecorded. Nothing left without being defined, categorized, and archived down to the smallest measurable detail. Until the human stood in the center of it. The sentence was already halfway spoken when the failure began. By authority of the High Council, the subject identified as. The presiding voice stopped. Not because of interruption. Not because of malfunction. Because the name in front of it was gone. The display flickered once. Then again. The identifier field remained active, confirmed, authenticated, and empty. Around the chamber, 12 separate recording systems continued to function perfectly. Every biometric feed was stable. Every environmental reading was within tolerance. The guards still held their positions, weapons steady, eyes locked on the prisoner. Yet none of them could say with any certainty who they were pointing those weapons at. The human had not moved. He stood exactly where he had been placed, wrists unbound, because there had never been a need to bind him, wearing a simple dark uniform that had passed all inspection protocols without anomaly. His posture was relaxed, almost patient. Not defiant. Not afraid. Just waiting. State your name, the presiding voice demanded, sharper now. The pause. Not from the human. From the system. There should have been a reference. A crosslink. A prior entry. Instead, every connected database returned the same result. Confirmed presence, no associated identity. The guards shifted. Subtle. Uncoordinated. One of them frowned as if trying to recall something that had just slipped out of reach. Another tightened his grip on his weapon without understanding why. The human watched them all. Then slowly he smiled. Not broadly. Not mockingly. Just enough to suggest recognition of something they had not yet understood. You've already met me, he said. The words landed cleanly in the chamber. Recorded. Verified. And immediately felt uncertain. The presiding authority attempted to recover control. This is a secured proceeding. Your identity has been verified upon entry. Has it? The human asked gently. A technician in the upper gallery began pulling the intake logs. The entry sequence was there. Clearance granted. Passage authorized. No breach. No anomaly. No name. The technician blinked, scrolled back, checked the secondary layer. Still nothing. Below, one of the guards took a step closer to the human, as if proximity might force clarity back into place. You were escorted here. I was there. Yes, the human said, meeting his eyes. You were. Then who are you? For the first time, something shifted in the human's expression. Not emotion. Certainty. You don't remember the walk? He asked quietly. The guard opened his mouth to answer. And stopped. Because he didn't. Not the corridor. Not the doors. Not the moment they entered the chamber. Only the fact that it had happened, stripped of everything that made it real. The room changed then. Not physically. But in the way every mind inside it began to reach for something solid and found less than it expected. The presiding voice lowered. Controlled. Careful. What are you? The human smile faded, not into hostility, but into something far more unsettling. We're the part of reality, he said, that doesn't stay where you put it. Silence followed. Heavy. Expanding. Because for the first time in its recorded history, the tribunal did not know what it was judging. And somewhere deep in the system logs, a flagged alert surfaced. One that had been filed, reviewed, and dismissed more than 100 times before. Human presence confirmed. Details unavailable. The presiding authority initiated a full system lockdown. Every exit sealed. Every sensor elevated to maximum sensitivity. Every recording system forced into redundant capture. If the human could not be defined, then he would be contained. That was the assumption. It lasted exactly 6 seconds. Because when the system completed its lockdown verification, one detail failed to resolve. The chamber was secure. The human was still standing in the center of it. And according to the system's own confirmation, no unauthorized individuals were present.
So far, everything we thought was certain has already collapsed. A human prisoner stands in the center of the most perfect tribunal ever built. Yes, no system can name him, no guard can remember him, and even the records confirm he doesn't exist. The chamber locks down, every sensor activates, and still the truth slips through. And now, as security chief, Arvek steps in. The question isn't just who this human is, it's what happens when your entire reality can't hold on to him.
The chamber did not erupt into chaos. That would have been easier to understand. Instead, everything slowed. Procedures unfolded with perfect precision, as if control itself could compensate for the absence of clarity. Secondary scans activated. Environmental filters recalibrated. Neural pattern readers engaged at full spectrum resolution. Every system designed to define, classify, and anchor a living being into data moved in synchronized layers. The result came back instantly. Complete scan. Stable subject. No anomalies. No identity. Security Chief Arvek entered the chamber 12 seconds after the lockdown sealed. He did not ask for a briefing. He did not look at the displays. He looked directly at the human. That alone set him apart. Most in the room had begun relying on the systems. When reality became uncertain, they trusted the structure built to interpret it. Arvek had spent 30 years learning the opposite lesson. Systems were extensions of expectation. When expectation failed, the system failed first. The human met his gaze without hesitation. "Step away from the subject," Arvek ordered. The guards obeyed immediately, not because of fear, but because they were relieved to have direction. The moment they moved, something subtle shifted again. The human did not appear different, but the distance made him easier to observe. Or perhaps easier to forget. Arvek stepped into the center of the chamber alone. "Your presence has been verified," he said evenly. "Your identity has not. That places you outside every legal framework governing this proceeding." The human nodded slightly. "That sounds inconvenient." "It is," Arvek replied. "For you." The pause. Then the human tilted his head, studying him with a level of attention that felt disproportionate. "No," he said softly. "Not for me." Arvek ignored that. "You will remain here while we establish a stable reference. If you attempt to leave—" "I won't," the human said. Not defensive. Not submissive. Certain. That certainty was the second anomaly. Arvek signaled the upper gallery. "Pull intake logs, cross-reference with corridor surveillance, and isolate every human entry within the last cycle." The technicians complied. At first, the results looked normal. Entry points populated. Movement patterns tracked. Clearance markers verified. Humans appeared exactly where they should be, moving through the facility with the same predictable rhythm as every other species. Then the filters tightened. Faces blurred, not visually but contextually. Identifiers thinned. Movement trails remained, but the reasons for those movements became vague, unsupported by the usual layers of intention and authorization. "Expand timeframe," Arvek said. The data widened. And the pattern deepened. Humans had been present in restricted zones. Not illegally. Not through breach. Through access that had been granted, documented, and then hollowed out. The permissions remained. The justification did not. A junior analyst in the gallery spoke, voice tight. "I'm running a cross-check on high-level decisions over the past decade." "Do it." Seconds passed. "There are humans present in 312 restricted deliberations." Arvek didn't move. "Define present." "They're listed as attendees. Observers. Support staff. Liaison roles. But. The analyst hesitated. "We can't determine why they were there." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Arvek felt it too, though he didn't show it. This wasn't infiltration. It was something worse. Integration without trace. He turned back to the human. How long? The human's expression didn't change. Longer than you're comfortable with. That is not an answer. It is the only one you'll keep. Arvek stepped closer. Not aggressively. Deliberately. You're suggesting this is not an isolated phenomenon. I'm suggesting, the human said, that you've been working around it your entire career. Another technician spoke up, faster now, urgency breaking through discipline. Chief, Personnel Registry. I can't generate a complete list of human employees currently inside the complex. Run it again. Multiple times. The count fluctuates. It stabilizes at a number, then loses entries when we attempt to isolate them. Arvek's jaw tightened. How many? 412, the analyst said. Approximately. Approximately is not acceptable. I know, the analyst replied quietly. That's the problem. Arvek looked at the chamber, at the systems, at the personnel who had built their entire professional existence on the assumption that information could be trusted if it was measured correctly. That assumption was eroding in real time. He turned back to the human. Are you doing this? The question hung there. Direct. Necessary. The human considered it, not as if deciding whether to lie, but as if deciding how much truth could survive being spoken. Then he shook his head. No. Arvek's eyes narrowed. Then explain it. I could, the human said, but you wouldn't keep the explanation. That is not how information works. A faint smile returned. It is, the human said, when the information describes us. Silence again. He let it settle. Then added almost gently, you're trying to treat this like a malfunction. It isn't. Nothing is broken. Then what is happening? The human looked around the chamber, at the guards, the technicians, the systems straining to hold something they could not anchor. What you built works perfectly, he said. It just wasn't built for us. Before Arvek could respond, another alert triggered in the system. Different this time. External. Deep-range sensors, far beyond tribunal jurisdiction, registered a mass fluctuation. Then larger. Gone. Source. Arvek demanded. Unknown, came the reply. Range is inconsistent. It shouldn't even be detectable at that distance. Arvek's mind moved quickly, linking patterns he did not yet understand. An unidentifiable human. A system that could not hold their presence. External anomalies appearing and disappearing beyond measurable range. He turned back to the human one last time. What are you hiding? He asked. The human's expression shifted again. Not to fear. Not to defiance. To something far more dangerous. Recognition. We're not hiding, he said quietly. Another pause. We're what you don't know how to see. At that exact moment, every system in the chamber registered a brief, synchronized drop in signal integrity. Not failure. Not damage. Just absence. And when the reading stabilized, one detail had changed. The human was still standing exactly where he had been. But no system in the chamber could confirm when he had last moved. Or if he ever had at all. The systems did not fail. That was the most unsettling part. Every display remained active. Every feed continued streaming. Every sensor reported stable function across all layers. There were no alarms, no warnings, no indication of malfunction. By every measurable standard, the chamber was operating exactly as designed. And yet nothing inside it could be trusted. Arvek did not raise his voice. He did not repeat orders. He shifted strategy. Isolate the chamber from central processing, he said. There was a pause, brief, but telling. Chief, that would sever real-time archival. Do it. The command propagated. One by one, the chamber's systems disconnected from the broader network. External data streams collapsed into silence. Redundant links terminated. What remained was a closed environment, self-contained, shielded, incapable of transmitting or receiving anything beyond its own boundaries. A perfect space for truth. Or so it was supposed to be. Arvek stepped back into the center of the room, facing the human again. If this is a systemic limitation, he said, then removing external interference should stabilize your profile. The human didn't respond immediately. He looked around the chamber as if noting something subtle, something none of the others could perceive. You think this is about interference, he said at last. It's about control. No, the human replied calmly. It's about expectation. Arvek ignored that. Begin scan. 3 independent systems activated simultaneously. Full-spectrum biometric mapping. Neural pattern capture. Cognitive resonance indexing. For the first time since the incident began, the data returned in full. Complete. Layered. Perfect. The chamber exhaled as one. There, a technician said, relief bleeding through. Stable identity structure. It's holding. Arvek didn't relax. He watched the human. The human watched the systems. And then, without warning, the technician's voice faltered. Wait. The data was still there. But something about it was wrong. Not corrupted. Not incomplete. Too complete. The profile contained every measurable detail, biometric signatures, neural pathways, behavioral probabilities, but none of it aligned into a coherent pattern. It was as if the system had captured everything and understood nothing. Classification? Arvek asked. Silence. Classification, he repeated. The system attempted to process. It failed. Not with error. With contradiction. The subject fit multiple behavioral archetypes simultaneously. Predictive models diverged. Threat assessments conflicted. Decision trees looped back on themselves. The more data the system used, the less stable its conclusions became. Impossible, someone whispered. The human tilted his head slightly. Not impossible, he said. Just incompatible. Arvek stepped closer again. You're telling me your species cannot be modeled. I'm telling you, the human replied, that you're trying to reduce something dynamic into something fixed. That is how understanding works. For you, the human said, that distinction landed harder than anything before it. For you, Arvek turned toward the gallery. Pull comparative data. Other species. Full-spectrum scans under identical conditions. The results came back immediately. Stable. Predictable. Consistent across every known civilization. Each species produced a clear, structured identity footprint. Variations existed, but the core remained intact. Definable, trackable, reliable. Only one dataset behaved differently. The human. Arvek felt the shape of the problem forming, but not yet resolving. Why? He asked. This time, the human answered without hesitation. Because you built your systems to understand creatures that become what they are. The pause. We're the opposite. Arvek's eyes narrowed. Explain. The human considered him carefully, as if measuring how much truth could survive comprehension. Every species you've catalogued, he said, has a stable identity structure. Their behavior evolves, but their core remains consistent. You can model it, predict it, define it. That is the basis of civilization. Yes, the human said softly. For you. Another pause. Then the shift. We don't have a fixed core. Silence spread through the chamber. That's not possible, Arvek said. It is, the human replied. You're looking at it. Arvek shook his head. Every organism requires a stable identity to function. Every organism requires adaptability to survive, the human countered. We just took that further than most. The data behind them continued to churn, trying to reconcile contradictions that refused to settle. Your system is trying to answer a simple question, the human continued. What am I? Yes. And it expects a consistent answer. Yes. The human smiled faintly. That's the problem. Arvek felt something shift, not in the room, but in his understanding. You're saying the answer changes. Constantly. That would make you unpredictable. The human's expression sharpened, just slightly. It makes us responsive. Before Arvek could press further, another alert triggered. Louder this time. Urgent. Chief, external sensors are spiking again. That's not possible, someone else said. We're isolated. We are, the technician replied, voice tightening. But the readings are still coming through local buffers. Arvek turned. Display. The main screen shifted. Deep space telemetry flooded in, cache data, delayed by seconds, now arriving all at once. Mass signatures. Multiple. Large. Too large. Positions fluctuating at the edge of detection. They're not holding shape, the analyst said. They appear, then vanish, then reappear in slightly different positions. Projection error? No, it's consistent across all buffered frames. Arvek's mind raced. Distance. Outer perimeter. Beyond standard patrol range. How long? The technician hesitated. First spike aligns with the tribunal incident. Arvek turned back to the human. You knew. It wasn't a question. The human didn't deny it. We noticed, he said. Noticed what? The human looked at the screen, then back at Arvek. Something entering your space, he said quietly. And you didn't report it? The human's expression didn't change. We did. Arvek's voice hardened. Where? A small pause. In a way your systems couldn't ignore. The realization hit like a fracture. The tribunal incident. The anomaly. The timing. You caused this, Arvek said. We revealed it, the human corrected. By compromising our systems? By working within their limits. That answer didn't resolve anything. It made everything worse. Why not warn us directly? The human held his gaze. Would you have believed us? Arvek didn't answer. Because he knew. They wouldn't have. Another spike hit the sensors. Closer this time. More defined. Not vanishing. Stabilizing. Chips. Large ones. And they were no longer at the edge of detection. They were approaching. The chamber shifted again, this time into controlled urgency. Orders began to move. Defense grids activating. Command channels opening. Containment protocols dissolving into mobilization. Arvek didn't move. He looked at the human. At the impossible data. At the systems that could not hold him. And for the first time, the question changed. Not what are you, but what are you for?
No, the situation has changed completely. What began as a mystery has become a crisis. The system can't define the human. The data refuses to stabilize, and something massive is approaching from deep space. Something that moves the same way humans do. Unpredictable, untrackable, impossible to model. Arvek is forced to face a terrifying possibility. This human isn't the threat. He might be the only solution. And now the real question begins. What is humanity actually built for?
For a fraction of a second, no one in the chamber spoke. Then the sanctuary came alive. Command channels burst open across isolated bands. Defense lattices ignited in layered geometry around the station. Deep-range batteries rotated toward vectors that only moments ago had not existed in any reliable sense. Across Orith Prime, thousands of systems shifted from diplomacy to survival without hesitation. But the speed of response carried something else beneath it. Uncertainty. Because every projection feeding those systems depended on models. And every model assumed the enemy could be understood. Identify them, Arvek ordered. We can't get a stable signature, the analyst replied. Mass readings fluctuate, structure doesn't hold. It's like they're slipping between frames. Arvek felt a cold recognition. Not identical, but familiar. He turned slowly back to the human. You see them clearly, don't you? The human didn't look at the displays. He looked at the room, at the people, the systems, the fragile confidence cracking under pressure. We see enough, he said. That's not acceptable, Arvek snapped. We need data, structure, intent. You need time, the human said quietly. Another spike hit. Closer again. This time the outer defense grid fired. A precise, measured volley designed to test response without committing full force. The beam struck empty space. Or what should have been empty space. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the readings shifted. The targets weren't gone. They had never been where the systems placed them. Adjust targeting, someone shouted. But adjust to what? The projections scattered, recalculating in loops that refused to converge. Every assumption failed. Every prediction dissolved. The chamber filled with controlled chaos, orders, corrections, overlapping commands that carried the sharp edge of a system losing its grip on reality. Arvek stood at the center of it, still watching. Because beneath the noise, something else was becoming clear. The enemy wasn't just evading detection. They were exploiting the same weakness. Rigid systems. Fixed expectations. Predictable interpretation. And suddenly, the human's presence was no longer the anomaly. It was the answer. Arvek turned. "What do you need?" he asked. The human met his gaze. No hesitation. No triumph. Just clarity. "Access," he said. "To what?" "Everything you're willing to trust," the human replied. "And just enough that you're not." Arvek didn't ask for clarification. He understood. Or at least he understood enough. "Authorize human integration across tactical layers," he ordered. The room froze. "Chief," a commander began. "Do it," Arvek said. Reluctantly, the command propagated. Human personnel, those that could be identified, those that could be located, those that the system still managed to hold on to, were granted immediate access to defense coordination nodes. Across the sanctuary, something subtle shifted. Not in the systems. In the behavior around them. Human engineers stopped waiting for directives and began moving. Human analysts bypassed prediction models and started mapping possibilities instead of outcomes. Human pilots, previously restricted to observational roles, took control of secondary craft and moved without waiting for optimal vectors. To the system, it looked chaotic, unstructured, inefficient. To Arvek, it looked adaptive. "Targeting is still unstable," the analyst said. "Stop trying to fix it," Arvek replied. The room went quiet again. "What?" "Stop forcing the data into a stable model," he said. "Work with what changes." It went against everything they had built, everything they trusted. But the alternative was already failing. The first human pilot engaged. Not with a perfect firing solution. With a guess. A calculated, shifting guess that adjusted mid-action. The shot didn't land where the system predicted. It landed where the target became. The result was immediate. For the first time, the enemy reacted. Their formations, if they could be called that, shifted sharply, breaking the fluid patterns they had maintained. "They're responding," the analyst said, stunned. "We hit something real." More humans moved. More unpredictable vectors. More actions that didn't align with optimal models but adapted in motion. The defense grid followed, not leading, not predicting, but reacting alongside. The battlefield changed. Not into clarity. Into chaos that could be navigated. The enemy lost their advantage. Because for the first time, they were facing something that didn't behave the way it should. Something that didn't stay where it was placed. Something that could not be reduced. Minutes stretched. Then broke. The last hostile signature collapsed. Not vanishing, not slipping, but failing. Destroyed. Silence followed. Real silence this time. The kind that comes after something irreversible. Across the sanctuary, systems stabilized. Readings returned to baseline. Damage reports began to form into something measurable, something survivable. Arvek stood in the chamber, breathing slowly, letting the reality settle. They had won. Not because they understood the enemy, but because they had stopped trying to. He turned to the human. "You knew this would happen," he said. The human shook his head. "We knew something would," he replied. "We didn't know what." "That's not reassuring. It's honest." Arvek studied him. "You allowed yourself to be captured," he said. "To trigger this." The pause. "Yes." "Why?" The human looked around the chamber one last time. At the systems. At the people. At the fragile order that had almost broken. "Because you wouldn't have listened otherwise." That stung more than Arvek expected. Because it was true. He exhaled slowly. "What are you?" he asked again. This time, the human didn't deflect. Didn't redirect. He answered. "We're what happens when survival depends on change," he said. "Not once. Not occasionally. Every time. Arvek nodded once. Then turned to the command interface. Update classification, he said. The system waited. For human species designation. There was no existing category that fit. No precedent. No model. Arvek didn't hesitate. Unbounded adaptive entities, he said. Allied. The system processed. For a moment, it struggled, trying to fit the designation into something structured. Then it accepted it. Not fully. Not cleanly. But enough. The human watched it happen. A faint smile returning. Not victory. Recognition. Across the sanctuary, humans returned to their roles. Engineers. Analysts. Technicians. Ordinary. As if nothing extraordinary had happened. As if they had not just redefined the terms of survival for an entire coalition. Arvek stood in the chamber long after the systems quieted, thinking, not about what he had seen, but about what he had missed. Because if this was what humans did when noticed, then how many times had they already acted, when no one was looking at all?
So, in the end, the truth wasn't that humans were invisible. It was they could never be reduced, where every other species could be measured, predicted, and understood. Humanity evolved to adapt, to change, to survive beyond expectation itself. And that's why they won. Not through power, not through perfect systems, but through something far more dangerous. The ability to respond when everything else fails. The real question isn't what humans are, it's how many times they are already saved everyone without ever being seen.